All right, Brandon Clayton, the algebra guy here. Today we are talking about multiplying and dividing integers. You should be able to simplify this problem by the end of this video. Let's get to it. So here are the questions that we want to answer. What are the rules for multiplying? What are the rules for multiplying integers? And what are the rules for dividing integers? So we want to talk about those two. You'll be pleasantly surprised to see the rules once I go over it. How do you simplify expressions that include division and multiplication? So we'll also work out some problems using both to show how to do that. So what are the rules for multiplying integers? The sign of the product of two numbers depends on their sign. What they're saying is the answer you get after multiplying two numbers depends on the signs that those two numbers have. So if you multiply two numbers and those two numbers are positive, you're going to get a positive product or a positive answer from a multiplication problem. And if you multiply two negatives, you're going to get a positive. So get that in your memory. Two positives is going to give you positives. Two negatives is going to give you a positive. Some people remember that because you multiply two positive people, you get positive people. Two negative people love to be together, so they're negative and they're happy too. I don't know. So you come up with a way, but negative times a negative is a positive. Now this is a difference than what we were talking about for adding. So don't confuse those. So don't think that since I have a negative 8 plus a negative 2, right, that this is going to be a positive, because that's just going to make that more negative, as we demonstrated with the counting tiles. We just took negative 8 and added another 2. Well, we lost 10 totally. So let's not get those confused. This is multiplication. Now, what if you have different signs? Positive times a negative is going to give you a negative, and a negative times a positive is going to give you a negative. So really, this is two ways of saying the same thing. They just switch places, if you notice. But if you put a negative and multiply by a positive, you're always going to get a negative. So negative 1 times any positive number is going to give you a negative answer. It's going to equal some negative answer. Negative 1 times negative 8. That's not what I meant to do. Times positive 8. Making this harder than what it is. So put a sign there. So it's just say 8. It's going to be a negative 8. So any negative times a positive is going to be negative. Positive times a negative. Positive times a negative is going to be a negative. So we'll practice that to make sure we got it. But that's the rule. So let's do these, remembering those rules. And it's really just two. Negative times a positive is what? It's going to be negative. And I know that 9 times 3 is 27, so that's pretty simple. What about negative times a negative is a... I'm hoping you just said positive. I think you did. I think I heard you. Positive times a negative is a negative. And positive times a positive, it stays positive. So this is going to be 42. Those rules are very important and make sure algebra or whatever math you're doing a lot faster and easier if you just remember those. And just doing a lot of practice problems is going to help you remember those. Let's continue. I'm doing some more. So negative 1 times positive. Negative times positive is a negative. I know 1 times 7 is 7. Negative times a negative is a positive number. And I know that 1 times 11 is 11. Looks like 7, but that's supposed to be 11. 11. There you go. What about the rules for dividing integers? What are they? The sign of the quotient. Remember, quotient is the name we give the answer after dividing two numbers. So the sign of the quotient of two numbers depends on what? It depends on their signs too. Well, let's look at this. If the signs are the same, you're going to get a positive answer. If the signs are different, you're going to get a negative answer. That's same thing. Same thing as the multiplication. So that makes this so much easier because you really don't have to remember anything different between multiplication and division rules about the signs, concerning the signs. If they're the same signs you're multiplying, it's going to be the same thing. Same signs dividing going to be same signs you're multiplying is going to be positive. So positive is positive. Negative times a negative is positive. But if they're different, it's going to be a negative answer. So keep that in mind. And as before, let's practice a couple just to draw this point, take this point home. Drive this point home. That's what I was trying to say. So here you go. Negative times a positive. Do you remember that one? These are two different signs. Yes, we're going to call that negative. So 27 divided by 3 is 9. And this is negative divided by negative. So negative divided by negative, that's going to give me a positive. Well, 100 divided by 4 is 25. And that's as simple as that. Let's do a couple more. 16 divided by negative 1. Well, 16 is positive and 1 is negative. So there's two different signs, so my answer is going to be negative. 16 divided by 1 is 16. Two of the same signs, negative and negative, going to give me a positive answer. 20 divided by 1 is 20. So I can leave that positive. And looks like our last one. Let's work through this one. Wow, there's a lot going on here. So when you have multiple operations, please remember PEMDAS. You can't just jump in there and start doing the ones that feel good to you. You need to use the correct order of operations. So one of the things I like to show for those of us who struggle any bit with order of operations is let's pull out all the operations we see. So there's a multiplication here, or let me just put a dot because the X can be confusing later on with this verb. So there's a dot there for multiplication. There's a plus sign here. There's a multiplication here. And there's a minus sign here. So now we see all of the operations. 1, 2, 3, 4 operations going on here. Which one do we do first? Well, do we have parentheses? Well, we have around a -7, but that's not anything else in there. So technically, we don't really have anything in the parentheses because there's nothing to solve in there. Do we have exponents? No, no exponents. Do we have any multiplication or division? And the answer is yes. Well, let's start to go from left to right and get the first one. So looking left to right, I see this one's our first one, and this is our second one. So let's do those two first. 7 times a -2. Well, that's a positive times a negative. Those are different signs, so I'm going to have a negative answer. 7 times 2 is 14. And here's my plus. I'm going to keep it that way. And I'm going to do my other multiplication. 4 times a -7. That's a different sign, so this is going to be a negative answer, -28. And bring down my -6. Now that I only have addition and subtraction left, matter of fact, let me highlight that in case you don't see it. So I have a plus sign here, and we have a minus sign here. Now this kind of looks like 2, right? But well, let's talk about that now. So this is going to become -14 plus a -28. What's the same thing as -14 plus a -28? Well, in the previous lesson, I talked about how -14 plus a -28 is the same thing as -14 minus 28. Some people just like to add the plus sign there. But you got -14, like you lost $14, and you added another loss of 28 to it. So really you're just combining these two negatives and getting a total loss of something. So what is 28 plus 14? And it's going to give me a negative answer because I know that it's just going more negative. 8 plus 4 is 12. 2, 3, 4. So that's 42. So this is going to be minus. I should have let me just erase this 14. And we're going to say that this, putting all this together right here, is going to be a -42. Now we got -42 minus the 6. So we're going to take 6 more away from this. And if we do that, it's going to give us a -48. Voila. That's it. That's how you handle multiplication, addition, subtraction, and division. I think I said them all. Oh, good. Forgot about these. So what about this one? What is -2 to the 4th asking us to do? So -2 to the 4th, the exponent is telling us we got to multiply this thing 4 times. -2 All right, that is getting a little bit confusing. Let me make sure I draw this out really good. So negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2. So what is that going to give me? Well, I know that negative times a negative is a positive. So these two is going to give me a positive 4. And then 4 times a negative 2. 4 times a negative 2 is going to give me, well, that's opposite signs. 4 times a negative, this negative 2 is going to give me 8. And now 8 times this negative 2, oh, it should have been negative 8. So negative 8 times this negative 2 is, that's a negative and negative. They're the same sign, so I know I'm going to do a positive answer. Negative 8 times negative 2 times negative 2 is going to equal a positive 16. All right, so that's how you do that. And I'm glad I showed you both of these problems, because in parentheses means I need to do everything in here to the fourth power. So I take negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2, everything in there to the fourth power. Now the difference is with this problem is going to be 2 to the fourth, which is 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. And whatever you get for the answer, we're going to add the negative on the end, because there's no parentheses saying include that negative like we saw over here. So we're just going to take 2 to the fourth, which is again going to be 16. But now we know to add the negative on the end to make this a negative 16. So this is one that can be tricky, especially if you put it into a calculator and not getting the right answer because you didn't put the parentheses around, or maybe you wrote it this way. All right, let's use our PEMDAS again. We need to do our parentheses first. 9 minus 12, this gives us a negative 3. And what's left over here is 12 minus 3 times this whole thing, because this negative 3 is still over here. So PEMDAS tells me to do my multiplication first before my subtraction. So I'm going to do negative 3 times negative 3. Those are both the same signs. Negative times negative is a positive, so this is going to be 9. So now I know this is 12 minus 9, which becomes easy, and knowing that's just 3. All right, and let's do this one. So let's identify all our operations again. We got a multiplication, a division, and we got an exponent. Exponent. I'm just gonna put exponent there. PEMDAS tells us to do which first? PEMDAS. So we don't have anything inside the parentheses that's more than that one piece. We do have an exponent, so we're going to do this exponent. So what is negative 2 to the third? Well, that's negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2. Negative 2 times negative 2 is a positive 4. It's supposed to be negative. 4 times a negative 2 times a negative 2 is a negative 8. So that's right here is a negative 8. Now I've done my exponent. Let's go back and do our multiplication division. So now let's do this piece. 8 times negative 9. Well, those are different signs, so I know it's going to be negative. Well, 8 times 9 is 72. And now do the division, divided by. So what is 72, or negative 72 divided by negative 8? They're both the same sign, so it's going to be positive. Negative divided by negative is a positive. I know that 72 divided by 8 is 9, so this is just going to be a positive 9. So be careful with your PEMDAS on these types of problems, because it could trip you up. All right, you should pause it here since I've done a couple already and see if you can get this one. The first thing I'm going to do is identify my operations and then apply PEMDAS. I got a division, a plus, and a multiplication. PEMDAS says do the parentheses, nope. Exponents, nope. Multiplication and division, yep. And they're going left to right. Looks like I'm going to hit this division first, so let's do that first. Negative 30 divided by 2. Well, negative divided by a positive is a negative. Negative 15. I'm going to skip the plus because we haven't got there on the PEMDAS yet. We're going to skip to this multiplication and leave that plus here. So let's do the multiplication. Negative times a negative is a positive. 3 times 7 is 21. Now I can come back since I've done the division, I've done the multiplication, and add these two terms. Negative 15 plus 21 is, what is that? 6. A positive 6, because my positive number is bigger when I'm adding, so it's going to be 6. Wow. That was some good stuff. All right, so did we cover everything? What are the rules for multiplying integers? Yep, we went over the rules for multiplying integers and dividing. This is supposed to be dividing. And we saw that they're the same thing, dividing. So they're the same thing. If you are multiplying the same sign, it's going to be positive. Positive times positive is positive. Negative times negative is positive. But if they're different signs, negative times positive, they're going to be a negative answer. How do we simplify an expression that includes division and multiplication? Did we go over that? Absolutely. Watch the video again if you missed it, because I can't explain that one as a simplified. But you get it. Go use PEMDAS, and we showed the steps of how to do it. Guys, thanks for tuning in. Again, my name is Brandon Clayton, the Algebra Guy, and I will see you next lesson.